Okay, good morning, everyone. I see a few people are here. Faye's here. Good morning, Faye. Good morning, Cindy. Good morning, KC and Adelbert. Good morning to you guys. Hello, Karen again. Hello, Lily and Aliana. Good morning. Luan's here. That's good. Lisa's here. That's good. Min is here. Hello, Carmen. Good morning. Who else is here? Um, Sorry, I was just looking at something else. Lim is here. Good morning, Lim. Mashid is here. Good morning. Jenna and Sam, good morning to both of you. Um, yeah, nice to see you all this morning. So here's what we'll do today. Yesterday we started talking about this important skill of critical thinking, and so we will talk just a little bit more about that. I will give you an opportunity to come up with some of your own arguments. And then we will continue on with our exploration of prehistory, and we'll look at the agricultural revolution, which is actually one of probably the most important cultural changes that have ever happened to human beings. So we'll kind of two parts for this, and then I've got something for you to read and see if you can figure out this author's argument on your own. So that'll be interesting. Okay, so let's get rolling here, okay, if we can. Again, if you have questions or things you want to say, just throw them up into the live chat and I will deal with. Sorry, somehow my mic got muted. You might have missed that, but we're going to dive right in. If you have questions, just keep adding them to the live chat and I'll address them, okay? Good morning, Ella, or good evening, Ella. Okay, so here we go. Yesterday we were talking about subsistence, right? And we said that, oh, good morning, Sabrina. Yesterday we were talking about subsistence, and we said that it was the way in which people get their food. So their subsistence strategy is how they acquire their food and how they process it, and sometimes how they store it if the culture stores food, right? And we said that this was important to look at because it serves as kind of a foundation for all the other aspects of culture, right? If before you can talk about anything else, human beings have to eat, right? We have to eat it, usually once a day at least. And so all of the other things that we associate with culture in terms of the behaviors and the values and the ideas and the beliefs, all those things are kind of sitting on the foundation of a culture's subsistence strategy. They sit on how people get their food. And again, I'm just pointing out that's a cultural ecology approach, which you'll remember we talked about with anthropological theory. We were talking yesterday and the day before. Good morning, Michael. No problem. We were talking yesterday about foraging or hunting and gathering as a subsistence strategy. And we said that hunter-gatherers, they gather their food from the natural world. And this is really how humans have acquired their food for most of our history, right? This farming thing, and certainly this, going to save on foods to buy your groceries. That's very, very recent. Human beings have been hunter-gatherers for almost all of our history, really. We said that most foragers use their resources in a way that is extensive and temporary. And by extensive, I meant that they eat a wide variety of different foods. And they often move from place to place very often. And so they don't stay in one place. Good morning, Ying. They don't stay in one place until all the food is gone. They sort of collect what is easy to collect and what's readily available. And then they move on. They move somewhere else to a place where food is easy to find as well. We said that most foragers, and these are simple foragers we're talking about, lived in small groups, and as a result, they knew their groups really, really well, right? If you lived in a foraging group thousands of years ago or hundreds of thousands of years ago, you would have spent almost your entire life with a small group of people, with maybe 40 or 50 people. And so obviously you would know them really well, you would have very strong relationships with them. And this is a world, of course, with no permanent settlements. So for the most part, foragers or hunter-gatherers, they don't stay in one place long enough to build houses or villages or anything like that. They move very, very often. The other thing we said, of course, is that they were experts at their environment. They understood everything about the place that they lived. They knew the plants, they knew the animals, they knew the seasons, they knew the landscape. They were experts in their environment. And so for you and me, of course, if we wandered out into the wilderness, we would probably die very quickly. But that's because we don't have the skills and the knowledge that foragers have. And so these people were experts in their environment. Most hunter-gatherers are in excellent physical health. They eat a lot of nutritious food and they get a lot of exercise. They have a lot of activity. And so they were actually in really good shape. And I think some people yesterday when we watched the video of the Hadza in Tanzania, I think a few people were a little bit envious because they seemed to have such a kind of peaceful, stress-free life, and I think that's valid. I think that they probably did have a great lifestyle. Most of these foragers. We said most of these foragers have no real power structure in society. Most people are broadly equal. And good morning again, Jimmy. Most people are broadly equal, and so you don't have most people don't have power over other people. Good morning, Caleb. So, but we separated foragers out into two groups, right? And we said there were simple foragers and there were complex foragers, and they fell into the category of simple or complex just based on their subsistence strategy. So we're not saying anything about their intellect, we're not saying anything about their culture, we're just saying that some people have more complicated subsistence strategies than others. And so the simple foragers tend to move around a lot. They don't store any of their food, and they generally don't have a lot of stuff, right? The only real technology they have is the things they need to hunt and the clothing that they need to wear. But complex foragers were a little bit different, right? They were able to stay in one place for longer because there was more food. And so sometimes they build semi-permanent villages. They store a lot of their food, particularly for the winter. And sometimes they accumulate stuff. They have things, right? Because they don't have to move around quite as much as simple foragers, and so they can have things, right? Now today we said that there aren't actually many people left foraging in the world, even though if you went back 15,000 years ago, let's say, everybody was a hunter-gatherer. Everyone was a forager because really farming hadn't been invented yet. But today we see that very few people make their living in this way. I showed you this map yesterday and I said that basically this is the only parts of the world where people still forage, where people hunt and gather with any kind of regularity. Most of the world gets its food through farming. Okay, so we talked about that, and then I pressed pause because I said we wanted to talk about critical thinking, right? And I said that critical thinking was an important skill for us because increasingly we are, I think increasingly we're in a place in history and an environment where there's so much information out there that it becomes difficult to know what to believe and how to deal with it all. And unfortunately, particularly in the United States, but not just in the United States, we're seeing people who will openly lie and manipulate the truth in order to achieve their particular goals. And if we're not careful, it can become very easy to believe some of those things. And accepting beliefs that are false or that have negative impacts that can hurt us, but it can hurt us all, right? And so I think this is an important skill to learn. Some beliefs can help us and some beliefs can hurt us, but the trick is to know which beliefs are which, right? How do we evaluate beliefs that are worth believing? Okay. Yeah. So I said that I'm just going to jump ahead just a little bit. We've seen all of these slides before, so don't panic. We said that critical thinking was based around arguments, right? And an argument is not a fight, right? Sometimes we use the word argument as like a battle or a fight, but that's not what we're talking about here. An argument is you stating that something is true or something that is not true, or something, this is the way something is, or this is not the way something is. You're making a statement about that, and then you're backing it up with reasons. You're giving people reasons to believe that the thing you say is actually true. Okay, that's what an argument is. And I said yesterday that arguments are important really in all fields. So wherever you think you might want to end up in your life, whether you might want to be, if you might want to be an academic, if you want to be a professional of some kind, or even if you have some sort of non-professional career goals in mind, arguments, learning how to build your own arguments and assess other people's arguments is going to be incredibly helpful to you. Like I said, academics deal with arguments all the time, right? Every journal or article is an argument trying to convince the scientific community of something, right? Lawyers make arguments all the time. Politicians, if they're good ones, they make arguments all the time. And I said, even no matter what field you work in, if you want your boss to give you a raise, you're going to have to give them an argument, right? You have to convince them that they should give you more money, and you're going to need reasons why. You can't just say, I want more money, right? So arguments are a critical skill for all of us to learn, okay? And what I said yesterday was that arguments were built on statements, so sentences that say the way something is, and there were different statements within an argument. There was conclusions and there was premises. And I said the conclusion is kind of the thing that someone wants us to believe, the sort of main point, and then the premises help to support that thing. Okay, and so I created a very simple argument for you based on coffee, and this was my argument, if you remember. My argument was that you should all drink coffee. That's what I think, just in this argument, not for real. My conclusion was you should all drink coffee. And again, I said, as good critical thinkers, you should be asking yourself, Mike, why should I believe you? Right? Why should I do this thing that you want me to do? And I gave you 3 premises. I said that it was delicious. I said that it was inexpensive. And I said that it would help to stimulate your brain and help you study and get better grades. Right? A very simple argument. And so what I wanted to encourage you to do is don't make a snap judgment, although our brains are very good at doing that, but try not to make a snap judgment and try to evaluate this argument to see first if it's a logical argument and if it holds together. Okay, so the first thing, I'll just go back to my slides here. The first thing I said is that do the premises logically support the conclusion? And so what I was talking about here is that in this case, are my premises all reasons why someone might drink coffee? So I want you to drink coffee. Why? Because it's delicious. Well, might someone drink a beverage because it's delicious? Yeah, they might, right? They might actually do that. That's a reason why someone would drink coffee. Might someone drink coffee because it's inexpensive? Yeah, they probably would. Again, if coffee was super expensive, very few people could afford to drink it. But it is reasonably inexpensive, right? And so people would be allowed to drink it for that reason. And finally, I said that coffee sort of stimulates your brain and helps you study and get better grades. Now, might someone drink a beverage if it helped them get better grades? Yeah, they might do that, right? So I think, and we went back and forth a little bit on this, but I think what we demonstrated was that all my premises were logical support for my conclusion, right? They're all reasons why someone might drink coffee. And then I asked you, are my premises true? Or could I prove their truth to you? And so my first premise was coffee is delicious. Is it true? And I think we said, well, it's a bit of a personal preference, right? Some people like it, some people don't. And so I suppose I could, if we were in a real classroom, I could bring my coffee maker into class. I could bring it in and make coffee and you could all try it, and maybe then I could convince you that it's delicious. We mentioned yesterday that we could do a survey, right? Maybe I could survey all Columbia College students and see if they like coffee, and maybe I could come back and say, look, 85% of Columbia College students like coffee, right? So maybe I could prove to you that my premise is either true, or I could prove to you that it's mostly true, right? I could demonstrate that most people think that it is delicious. My second premise was that it was inexpensive, and how could I prove that to you? And I think we said, well, I could do some math, right? I could compare the price of coffee with the price of other drinks, right? Maybe bottled water or Coke or Monster energy drink. I could do a little calculation to figure out how much it costs me to make coffee at home. Maybe I could do a fancy bar graph, and then I could maybe convince you that coffee is actually not that expensive. And we said, of course, there was some degree of relativity here, right? If you were a super rich person, then coffee's not going to be expensive to you no matter what, right? But if you are a homeless person with no job, then coffee actually might be very expensive. So there's a little bit of relativity here, but I think we agreed that I could create some data in order to convince you that my premise was true. And the third one, and I think we did this yesterday, I think so. The last premise I said was that coffee stimulates your brain and helps you study and get better grades. And so maybe what I could do to prove this to you is I could dig through scientific literature, right? I could do a little bit of research and see if there's some science that says that, oh, people who drink coffee, they perform better on their exams and they get better grades. Now, I don't know if that science is actually out there or not, but I could dig around and maybe I could find that, and maybe I could present it to you and say, look, the science says that drinking coffee helps you study and helps you get better grades. Maybe, right? So what I wanted to sort of demonstrate to you is that I made up this very simple argument, and we kind of tested it out, right? We said that do my premises logically support the conclusion? Are they reasons why someone might drink coffee? Yeah, I think that it's okay. Are my premises true, or could I prove their truth to you? And again, I think we've agreed that not bad, right? I could probably demonstrate that my premises are true, or true for most people. Yeah, and so I have a reasonably good argument. Now, you could attack my argument in a number of ways, and we'll probably deal with this a little bit later. Yesterday, I forget, it might have been Sam, but I'm not sure. Somebody brought up the idea that, well, there's some things that I haven't addressed, right? I haven't talked about health, for instance. Some people think caffeine or coffee is not good for your health, and so I didn't say anything about that. And so if I wanted to build a better argument, I might have to address that. Again, that's something that we'll deal with a little bit later. We could also talk about religion, right? If your religion forbids you from using or from ingesting any drugs or alcohol, caffeine is technically a drug, right? And so if your religion says no drugs or alcohol, then my argument doesn't matter, right? It can be as logical and true as possible, but if your religion says no and you're going to follow your religion, then it doesn't matter what I argue, right? So there are other concerns here, and we'll kind of deal with those later. But for now, all we want to understand is what an argument is and at the very basic level how it works, okay? So in the comments here, let me know. Is that good? Does that make sense? Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down, or if you have a question, say, I don't understand this or I don't get this. What do you think? Are we good so far? Are we good so far? Let's see. Okay. So, okay, Cindy's good. Ying is good. Liana is good. Ella, Karen, Thesa, Mashik, KC, good. Good, all right. Let's see. Okay, Luan says good. Lim says good. Adalbert's good. Michael's good. Jimmy's good. Okay, everyone seems all right. That's cool. But now we'll find out. Now we'll find out for real if you're all as cool as you say you are. So, what I would like you to do, what I would like you to do is I would like you to create your own argument. Okay? So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you about 5 minutes. Okay? And what I want you to do is create your own very simple argument, just like I did, right? I think we can agree that this was a super simple argument for me to make. And I want you to create your own argument that is similarly simple. It can be about anything at all. It can be about food or sports or movies or graphic novels or music or politics or school or whatever. It can be about anything, okay? All I want you to do is create a very simple argument that has a conclusion, that says something is or isn't a certain way, and then try to create maybe 2 premises, okay? You don't have to go with 3. 2 premises that logically support that conclusion, okay? Type them out so that you can just copy and paste them into the live chat here, and then we'll see what we have, okay? So I'm going to give you 5 minutes, create your own arguments, and then be ready to pop them into the live chat so we can talk about them, okay? All right, so 10 minutes. Yes, Jimmy, you can use it. You can definitely use it. I'll give you just a little more than 5, okay, Aliana? Okay, people. So I see lots of stuff coming up in the live chat here, which is awesome. Let's deal with it, okay? So the first thing I think that came up was Sam. Everyone should not wear school uniforms. Okay, so that's a perfectly good. That's a perfectly good conclusion for your argument, right? You might be arguing, yeah, people shouldn't wear uniforms to school. They should just wear the regular clothes, whatever they want, okay? So if you want to do that, if you want to make an argument about that, there needs to be reasons to support it, right? Because you might say to me, you might say, Mike, nobody should wear school uniforms. And me, being a good critical thinker, I should ask you, Sam, well, why should I believe that? And you have to give me some reasons. You have to give me some premises why people should not wear uniforms at school, okay? So I'm going to press pause on that and I'll try and come back to it. Adalbert, this is, you've got a couple things here. Football, okay. So those are things football is. Any of those could be a conclusion for an argument. And so you could say football's a really fun sport. Or you could say football is the best of all of the sports. And then you could give me reasons to convince me why that's the case, right? Hello. Do you have an argument? No? Okay. All of those could work. I'll come back to you in a little bit, Adalbert. Aliana's got one here, but she kind of fills it in more below, so I'm going to just skip it for now. Ying says, conclusion, you should go to school every day. Okay. As a good critical thinker, I'll ask why. Why should someone go to school every day? And Ying says, because you will learn things, you will learn knowledge. Okay. And premise, all students do the same thing, right? Everyone else is coming to school every day, so should you. Okay, that's not bad. Karen's argument is that 2020 is the worst year ever. And so as a good critical thinker, I should say, why would I believe that, Karen? Why is 2020 the worst year ever? And Karen would say, well, there's fires in Australia, right? There's very destructive wildfires in Australia. There's this COVID-19 thing, which is killing all kinds of people. And there's all kinds of other threats happening, but seemingly nobody even cares about those. So that's not bad, right? The proof for the fact that 2020 is the worst year ever is wildfires and pandemic disease and the fact that there's all kinds of other things to worry about, but nobody even cares about that stuff. Okay, that's not bad. You'd probably find a lot of people agreeing with you, Karen, that 2020 is not a great year so far. Cindy's argument here is about playing games, and I'm guessing like video game and gaming. I think that's what you're talking about. Playing games is not good for your life. Okay, as a good critical thinker, why should I believe that? Cindy says, well, it wastes your time. Okay. Another premise is that it is addictive. Okay. And it kind of takes away time from your studies. Time that you should be studying, you might be playing video games. And so that's a good argument. You've got a clearly stated conclusion about what something is or isn't good, and you've got three premises here. And so this one I just want to take a quick minute and look at because, how could we demonstrate that video games are addictive? Well, we could look into some scientific research and see if people have studied that, right? Is it a waste of time? Well, again, that's a bit relative as well, but we could dig into it. Yeah, maybe I'll just leave it there. But that's a good one too. I like that one, Cindy. Aliana says, you should go swimming in this weather. And I'm guessing you mean sort of warm, summery weather. Why should we go swimming? Well, it's good exercise. Okay, good premise. You'll feel cooler due to the heat, so you won't be as cold swimming because the weather's warm. Yeah, okay, that's nice. Nice, simple little argument. I like that. Ella's conclusion here is that online school is better than actually going to school. Okay, as a good critical thinker, why should I believe that? Well, Ella says that it's more efficient. Actually, I can put this up here. I keep forgetting to do that. Ella says that it's more efficient. You save time on the commute going back and forth from school. Um, Ella says that online school is better than going to school because it's better for the environment. We're not using paper books anymore or paper anything, it's all digital. And her third premise is that communicating across the screen makes some people say more, right? So people who might be afraid to speak up in class might feel a little more confident just typing it up. Yeah, I like that. That's a pretty good one. Thesa says, reading, I'm going to put it up here. Reading books improves your knowledge. Okay. Okay. So, provides many green. Okay, hang on. How about this? How about we say that the conclusion of this argument, Thesa, is reading books is a worthwhile thing to do. It's a good thing for people to do. Okay, and so why should we believe that? Well, because reading improves your knowledge. Books have lots of great information in them that you might want. Okay, and it synthesizes the experiences of the ancients, right? So it helps pass down knowledge from the past. So all of those might be good reasons why reading is a worthwhile thing to do, right? It's a thing that people should do. So yeah, I think that's good, Thesa. I think you were just missing a conclusion to kind of tie it all together. But I think if you started with reading is a worthwhile thing to do, then I think you've got a great argument there. Sabrina, you got why schools should not have uniforms. Yeah, so that's good. That's a good starting place for an argument. Students should not have to wear uniforms to school. Then as a critical thinker, I might ask, well, why? Why do you think so? Why should students not wear uniforms to school? And that's where you come in with some premises, right? You give me some support in terms of why you believe it's a bad idea for students to wear uniforms, okay? But you've got a good conclusion there, Sabrina. That's a good place for an argument to start. Chris has a conclusion here, an argument. Video games are good for you, I think, which is the opposite of Cindy's argument, which is good. Video games are good for you. Why should we believe that, Chris? Well, Chris says they're entertaining. Okay. Chris says that they can help you stay focused. Okay, so maybe they can train your brain to focus on something. Okay. And they're also stimulating, right? They can help you with problem solving or hand-eye coordination or all kinds of different things, right? So Chris's argument here about video games are good for you because they're entertaining, they help you with focus, and they're sort of stimulating to your brain in some way. Yeah, that's a decent argument, right? Come back to Sam here. Sam's argument, I think, was actually similar to Sabrina's conclusion. Students should not have to wear uniforms to school. Okay, and so again, as good critical thinkers, we ask ourselves, why not? Why should students not wear uniforms? And Sam says, A, they're boring, right? Everyone will look the same, boring, okay? And not creative, okay? Second premise is that the uniforms are not comfortable, right? They're not comfortable. That's perfectly fine, right? So students should not have to wear uniforms to school because they're boring and uncreative and because they're uncomfortable. Perfectly good argument. Sabrina's got the same kind of argument here. Students should not have to wear uniforms to school. Why? Because if they're allowed to wear regular clothes, they can they can express themselves, right? Yeah, that's good. That's a good reason why students might not want to wear uniforms. Sabrina's second one here is not every student can afford the school's uniform. Okay, so uniforms can be expensive, and so students might not be able to buy them. And third premise, many students dislike rules. Adding one more rule to the school that could just be another rule for a student to break. Yeah, there's lots of rules in a school already. Do we need more rules about what people wear? Is this really that important? Perfectly good argument, right? Students should not have to wear uniforms because they don't allow students to express themselves. Students might not be able to afford them, and it's just another rule, right? Do we need another rule? Perfectly good argument there, Sabrina. Carmen, I skipped over you there, but yes, that's what a premise is. I'm not sure if you copied that in there by mistake or not. Okay. Min says, conclusion. Reading books is good for your life. Yeah, okay. Why should we believe that? Well, books can be funny, right? You can get enjoyment from these books. It's one premise. That's good. You can read anytime you're free, so you don't have to. It's not like you have to go anywhere or set something up to do it. You can just open a book and start reading. It's very easy to do. And third, you can gain knowledge from this, right? You can gain knowledge from reading. So that's a perfectly good argument. Reading is good for you. It's a good activity to do because sometimes they're funny and enjoyable, because you can do it almost any time you have some free time, and because you can gain knowledge from it. Perfectly good argument. Mashid's argument, everyone should work. Lots of people would disagree with you, Mashid, but okay, everyone should work. Why should we believe that? Well, because people need to make money, right? They need money for food and rent and all those things, right? Secondly, people should work because it's a good opportunity to socialize, right? You go to work, you're with other people, you interact with them, and that's good. Socializing with people is good for our mental health, right? Sure, that works for me, Mashid. That totally works for me. Luan says, you should take the time to listen in leisure. Okay. So Luan's saying here, I think if I'm paraphrasing you correctly, you should listen to music. You should spend some time and listen to music. So why should we do that? Why should we listen to music? Well, it can help you reduce stress, right? You can chill out and relax, right? With music. Music helps you kind of calm down. Yeah, that's one good premise. There's probably more, but that's definitely a good start. Lim says, textbooks should be replaced by e-books. I know our principal would agree with you on that, Lim. Textbooks should be replaced by e-books. Why should we believe that? Why should we replace textbooks? Well, Lim says it would decrease the number of trees used to produce paper, so it's better for the environment. We could probably suggest a few more, but it's definitely cheaper, right? E-books are cheaper to produce than regular textbooks. We could say that e-books don't weigh anything, and so when students go to school for real, they don't have to carry 100 pounds of books on their back. There's probably more, but all of those would work. So that's a good argument. And then Jimmy's got one here. Video games are good for you. You should play video games. Why? Why should we play video games? Jimmy says because it can train you in conflict. So I guess it helps you to be cool under pressure, right? When you're playing video games and lots of things are happening, you can kind of focus and handle all of these crazy events. It can also, let me see what you're saying here. It can also help you in calculating and predict. I guess it can help you with strategizing, right? Lots of video games require some degree of strategy, and if they're multiple player games, they require cooperation with other people, right? So depending on the game you play, it can help you to kind of focus and deal with a lot of crazy things that are happening at once, and so that might be beneficial. It can help you to coordinate and cooperate with other people if there's multiple players on the game, and it can help you maybe with your strategy, right? It can help you because some games require a bit of strategy, and all of those might be reasons why you should play video games if you want to accept that argument. Okay, so that was pretty good. I think we have a reasonable grasp of how to create these arguments, right? If we're going to make a statement that we should play video games, or that we shouldn't play video games, or that we should go swimming, or that we shouldn't have to wear school uniforms, or that 2020 is the worst year ever. All of those are statements about things that are or are not, right? Things that should be or things that shouldn't be. And without any sort of backup, they're just opinions, right? So we have to provide premises, we have to provide reasons why other people should believe the things that we say, right? Why should we believe that 2020 is the worst year ever? Why should we believe that students shouldn't have to wear uniforms? Why should we believe that video games are good or video games are bad? Why should we read more, right? All of those require premises. They require support in order to all those require support in order to convince people, right? In order to be proper arguments rather than just opinions. Okay, that was really good. I like that. I liked all the arguments that came out of that. Good job, people. Did a good job. Okay, let's take a 10-minute break here, and then when we come back, we'll deal with a few more arguments, and then we'll head into that agricultural revolution. Okay, so take a little break, stretch your legs, and I'll see you back here in 10 minutes. Okay. Okay, people, and we're back. So, we were just looking at simple arguments. You just, of course, made a bunch of your own, and they're all pretty good. They all have a decent conclusion, and they have premises. They have reasons why we should believe it, why we that support your conclusion. Um, Next up, let's try a couple of these, okay? Whoops, let's try a couple of these. So here we have some simple arguments. So let's look at number one really quickly. This is a very simple argument, maybe even more simple than the ones that you just created. But let's look at this. So the first one is because assault rifles, so the guns that go brrr, because assault rifles have no peaceful civilian use, the government should ban assault rifles. So in the live chat, what are we being asked to believe here? What's the conclusion of this argument? Again, it's a very simple one. It's only one sentence, but there's a conclusion and a premise here. So what's the conclusion? What are we being asked to believe? What are we being asked to believe here? Because assault rifles have no peaceful civilian use, the Canadian government should ban assault rifles. Sam says those rifles are not good for civilian use. Okay, what else? What else do we think? What are we being asked to believe here? KC says assault rifles should be banned. Okay, other thoughts? Karen says assault rifles are not used peacefully. Okay. Aliana says these rifles are really dangerous. Okay. What else? What else do you think? Okay, pretty quiet. So, because assault rifles have no peaceful civilian use, the Canadian government should ban assault rifles. So, this one's almost tricky because there's just so little there. Kiana, you're right, or Casey, you're right. Assault rifles should be banned. And again, how we can help figure out where the conclusion is to remember to ask ourselves that question of why should we believe this thing, right? And so if the conclusion is this, that assault rifles should be banned, the question of course is why? Why should we ban these rifles? And the premise that's given here is that because there's no peaceful civilian use for these things, okay? If we think it's the other way, if we think if we think the conclusion is that there's no peaceful use for these assault rifles, well, why should we believe that? The only other thing we have is that they should be banned, and that doesn't support the fact that there's no peaceful use. Okay, so these two statements kind of only fit together. They only have one relationship in that one supports the other, right? And so if you ask yourself the question, why should I believe that? The other piece should give you the answer, right? If it's the premise. If it's not the premise, then you've got things a little bit backwards. So, KC, I'm going to say that That's definitely the conclusion here, that the assault rifles should be banned. Why should we believe that? Why should they be banned? Well, because they have no peaceful civilian use, right? The only thing I want to point out here is Aliana, you're right. These rifles are really dangerous. I totally agree with you. But when we're looking at arguments in this stage, we don't want to add anything in that's not already there. And so the fact that they are dangerous isn't really stated in the argument, so we don't want to add stuff in that's not there at this point. Okay, so I totally agree with you. You are right. But at this stage of kind of pulling apart arguments, that's not there. So let's just worry about what's actually there. Let's look at this second argument here. So it says the Globe and Mail's report on business. The Globe and Mail is a newspaper or media outlet here in Canada. Most people read it online, of course, but it says here that the Globe and Mail's report on business says that people should invest heavily in stocks. Therefore, investing in stocks is a smart move. So in this argument, what are we being asked to believe? What's the conclusion of this argument? What's the conclusion of this argument? What are we being asked to believe? Liana says that we should invest in stocks. What else do you think? What are we being asked to believe here? Karen, we should invest in stocks. Sheed, investing in stocks is a good thing, a good move. What else? Investing in stocks will surely benefit you, Chris says. Okay. Yeah, so you've all identified this one correctly, right? The Globe and Mail's report on business says people should invest heavily in stocks. Therefore, investing in stocks is a smart move. So you're perfectly right. What we're being asked to believe is that we should invest in stocks, that investing in these things is a smart move. And again, if you ask yourself, well, why should I believe that thing? Why should I believe that investing in stocks is a smart move? The other piece answers that question, right? Because the Globe and Mail says, right? The Globe and Mail report on business says that people should do this, right? Now, if you think that's a little bit weak, you're right. It is a little bit weak. There's kind of a missing premise here. And so I think the missing premise might be that do we know that the Globe and Mail knows anything, right? Or do they know anything about finances? Do they give good advice? And so you might, if you wanted to make this a better argument, you might add in the premise that most people see the Globe and Mail as an authority in financial matters in Canada. Okay, so then we would have an argument that you should invest heavily in stocks. Investing in stocks is a good idea. Why should we believe that? Well, the Globe and Mail says that you should. The Globe and Mail says that it's a good idea. And the Globe and Mail knows what it's talking about, right? It's a financial authority here in Canada. So then we have a good argument, right? And again, we can expose the conclusion by simply asking, why should we believe this thing? Okay? Number 3, this is kind of more of a personal example, I guess, but when Joseph takes the bus, he's always late. And he's taking the bus today, so I'm sure he is going to be late. So what are we being asked to believe here? What are we being asked to believe? What's the conclusion? When Joseph takes the bus, he's always late, and he's taking the bus today, so I'm sure he is going to be late. Sam says he will be late anyway. Masheed says he is going to be late today. Liana says, do not take the bus. Under any circumstances, don't take the bus. Joseph is going to be late, says Karen. What else do you think? When Joseph takes the bus, he is always late. And he's taking the bus today, so I'm sure he's going to be late. Cindy says, some habits never change. He will be late. Okay. Lisa says, he is going to be late today. Let's see. Lim says, Joseph will be late today. Okay. So I think we have a pretty good grasp on this one. I'm going to give, not that I'm keeping points, but I'm going to give the points to Mashid for Joseph's going to be late today. Maybe half points to Karen for the fact that he's going to be late. Thisa, he's going to be late today. And Lim as well. Joseph will be late today. And so that's our conclusion. That's what we're being asked to believe. We're being asked to believe that today Joseph will be late, right? So today Joseph will be late is our conclusion. And the two premises in that one are A, when he takes the bus, he is always late. And today, he is on the bus, right? That's how that argument is built, right? So we're being asked to believe that today Joseph is going to be late. Why should we believe that? Well, every time he takes the bus, he is late. And today, he is on the bus, okay? Those are the two supporting premises for that one. And yes, Adalbert, he should address that, right? He should take an earlier bus, Joseph. Come on. What about this one? Wow, this movie is on iTunes, but it was never even shown in theaters. It is not a good sign when a movie goes straight to iTunes without ever being shown in theaters. It must be pretty bad. So what are we being asked to believe here? What is our conclusion? What's our conclusion here? What are we being asked to believe? This movie is awful, says Mashid. Aliana says you should not watch this movie. Sam says the movie is bad. Oh yeah, watch. That's okay. Cool. The movie is awful. You should not watch the movie. The movie's bad. This movie is horrendous. I see we're getting even more and more creative with our adjectives, which is fine. Which is fine. This movie is not good, says Tisa. All of these are correct, right? This argument is trying to convince us that the movie is pretty bad, right? That's the conclusion. Why should we believe this movie is bad? Well, it went straight to iTunes and it was never shown in theaters. And second premise, when a movie does go directly to iTunes without being shown in theaters, that's not a good sign, right? Bad movies go directly to iTunes. This movie went directly to iTunes. Therefore, this is probably a bad movie, right? Okay. Good stuff. Last one. No one should buy a beer that is brewed in the United States. Old Guzzler Beer, wow, that's a bad name. Old Guzzler Beer is brewed in the United States, so no one should buy it. Okay, what's the conclusion? What are we being asked to believe? What are we being asked to believe? Let's see. Karen says, "Don't buy this beer." Sam says, "Don't buy Old Guzzler beer. It's bad." Adalbert says, "We should not buy beer from the States." Mashid says, "No one should buy Old Guzzler beer." We should. This is an interesting way to state it, Chris, but we should be racist to U.S. beer. I'm not sure if you can be racist against a beer, but okay, we'll go with it. Yeah, do not buy beer in the U.S., says Cindy. Thesa says no one buy Old Guzzler. Sabrina says no one should buy beer brewed in the United States, and Old Guzzler is one of them. Aliana says we should not buy beer from Old Guzzler. Okay. This one can be a little bit tricky because the conclusion is kind of in two places. I think the closest one is maybe Mashid. Some people are pretty close. Thesa's kind of got it. Aliana's got it as well. Sam's got it. I think Mashid kind of has stated the conclusion best here. No one should buy Old Guzzler beer, right? And again, why should we believe that? Well, because you shouldn't buy beer brewed in the United States, right? You should be racist toward US beer. Nobody should buy beer brewed in the United States. And Old Guzzler beer, well, it's brewed in the United States. So the conclusion here is that no one should buy Old Guzzler. Do not buy this beer. Okay, good stuff. Let me show you this. Oh, that's okay. Let's read this here. This has to do with some military spending. So the cost of this new fighter jet is $650 million, and the cost of 3 bombers is $1.2 billion. The Canadian government intends to fund such projects. Is this an argument? Is there an argument here? What do you think? Is there an argument here? Sam says no. Okay. Is there an argument here, people? Karen says she doesn't think so. Okay. Siobhan says maybe. Thesis says no. Okay. Well, if you said no, you are correct. These are 3 statements, right? Each question or each sentence is a statement. They're all related to each other, right? They all have to do with military spending on airplanes in Canada, but there's no argument here. If you ask yourself at the end of every sentence, if you ask yourself, why should I believe that? And then look at the other things they tell you, none of these statements really supports any of the others, right? They're just 3 related sentences on the same thing. And so there's no argument here at all, right? They're just 3 statements. They're not trying to convince us of anything. They're just telling us 3 things. But with a little bit of editing, we can make an argument here. Okay, so have a look at this now. So this is Canada's Auditor General. So the Auditor General is he's kind of they're the government people who make sure that people are spending money well. Canada's Auditor General says that any weapon that costs more than $50 million will actually impair our military readiness. The cost of the fighter jet is $650 million. The cost of the bombers is $1.2 billion. We should never impair our readiness. So we should never hurt our military's ability to be ready. Therefore, the Canadian government should cancel both of these expensive projects. So now we've added a couple sentences in here, and now we have an argument. So what's the conclusion of this argument? What are we being asked to believe? What are we being asked to believe? What do you think there, people? What are we being asked to believe? Okay, so Adalbert says the expense should be reduced. Okay, so we shouldn't spend that much money, maybe? What else do you think? Karen says these projects should be canceled, says Karen. Carmen says should cancel these expensive projects. Sam, projects should be canceled. Cindy, Canadian government should cancel these both projects, right? The fighter jet and the bomber project. All right. Let's give you another few seconds here. Ying says there is an argument, and yes, you're correct. Aliana says Canada should not invest in these expensive projects. Okay. Yeah. So this is good, right? The simplest kind of explanation here is maybe Carmen's, but I think all of you have it right. The Canadian government should cancel both of these projects, right? Yeah, the Canadian government should cancel these projects. And so again, as good critical thinkers, we should ask ourselves why, right? Why should we believe? Why should we cancel both of these projects? And so the premises are expensive military projects impair our readiness, right? Both of these projects are expensive, right? They both cost more than $50 million. And we don't want to impair our military readiness, right? We don't want to inhibit our military's ability to respond. And so therefore, we shouldn't spend this money, right? So that's good. You guys did really good there. Yeah, there we go. Okay, last one. So Alicia went to the bank to get a more recent bank statement of her checking account. And so this is like 1,000 years ago when people didn't have banking apps and they had to actually go to the bank to figure out how much money they had in their account. So again, this is hundreds of years before you were born, but this is what people used to do. Alicia went to the bank to get a more recent bank statement of her checking account. The teller told her that the balance was $125. Alicia was shocked to see that it was so low. She called her brother to see if he had been playing one of his twisted pranks. He wasn't. Finally, she concluded that she had been a victim of bank fraud. So, my question to you here, is there an argument? Is this an argument or not? Is this an argument? Chris says nay. Thesis says yes. Sam says no. Lim says no. Eliana says yes. Where did all her money go? That's my question too, Eliana. Where'd all my money go? Carmen says no. Cindy says no. Min says no. I think we've got more no's than yeses, but is this an argument? Karen says no. Adalbert says no. Ying says no. All right. Interesting. Ella says no. Right. Well, nice work, people, because you are correct. This is not an argument, right? It might seem like it is, right? Because at the end, we're looking for a conclusion, and it actually says she concluded that she had been a victim of bank fraud. But again, when you look at it, you see that this is not an argument because it doesn't work for our strategy of asking why we should believe it. Okay, so let's say that we got confused. I know you've all identified that there's no argument here, and you are right. But let's just pretend we got confused and we thought that it was an argument. Okay, so let's say we thought, okay, this is an argument that Alicia is a victim of bank fraud, and so we would ask ourselves, well, why should we believe that? Why should we believe that she is a victim of bank fraud? So she went to the bank to get a bank statement. Her balance is $125. Is having $125 in your account evidence of bank fraud? No, right? Alicia was shocked to see that it was so low. Is that evidence of bank fraud? No, I'm shocked at my bank balance all the time. I wish I was a victim of bank fraud, but I'm not. Her brother was not playing a prank on her. Is that proof of bank fraud? No. So this is not an argument, right? It's just a little story. Now, Alicia's probably doing some critical thinking in her head, right? That's how she comes to the conclusion that she's a victim of bank fraud. But for us, that's not really what it is, right? It's just a little anecdote. It's just a little story about Alicia going to the bank. There's no argument here. There's nothing for us to think critically about. And so I think I would say always ask yourself that question. Why should I believe this thing? And if you find that the other information gives you reasons to believe it, then yeah, somebody might be presenting you with an argument. If not, then somebody thinks they're giving you an argument and they're not, or you don't have an argument. You have something else. You have a story. Okay. So you are correct, right? This is a little story about Alicia. There's a bunch of descriptive claims, but we don't really have an argument here. Again, we could turn it into an argument, but we won't do that. We'll just leave it kind of as it is. The last thing I'll say about critical thinking before we move on here is that we don't want to confuse an explanation with an argument, okay? So explanations tell us why or how something is the case, but arguments have something to prove, right? They're trying to convince us of something. Explanations don't. Explanations just say why things are a certain way. And so I think I'm missing the slide that says this, but if we say that Chris, if we say that Chris stole the money because 3 people saw him do it, that's an argument, right? Chris stole the money. Why should we believe that? Well, we should believe that because 3 people saw him do it. If we say that Chris stole the money, but he stole it because he needed money to buy food, that's not an argument. That's an explanation, right? It says why Chris stole the money in the first place. So those are kind of different things, right? One is saying why something happened, but the first one is trying to prove to you that Chris stole the money. It's trying to prove to you that that thing is true. Okay, so explanations and arguments are not the same thing. Sorry about that, Chris. I know you would never steal. Okay. Let's go back to the agricultural revolution. So where we left off with this, maybe about an hour ago, we said that most foragers are just found in marginal environments today. They've kind of been pushed to the edges of most environments by people with different subsistence strategies, specifically farmers. What we find here is that for most of our history, humans were foragers. We were hunter-gatherers, but in some places of the world, around 12,000 years ago, some people start to change their subsistence strategy. Some people begin to grow their own food. Okay, so this happens in a few different areas of the world, and it happens at different times. And so this might be a little bit difficult for you to see. It might be kind of small, but you can see some of the earliest agriculture showing up in Southeast Asia and in, well, actually, you can see some of the earliest agriculture showing up in the Middle East. And so in kind of ancient history, we call that area of the world Mesopotamia. Nowadays, it's a little bit of Iran, Iraq, Syria. That part of the world is referred to as Mesopotamia in sort of ancient times, and that's where agriculture sort of begins, starting maybe around 10,000 years ago. You can see on the map that other places also begin to switch to agriculture a little bit later. You can see people starting to grow rice as early as 5000 BC in Southeast Asia. You can see they're starting to grow a variety of crops kind of in sub-Saharan Africa and in the Mediterranean around 4000 BC. And in certain parts of North and South America, you can see people growing a number of different crops as well. So certain places in the world begin to start growing their own food, and they start at different times. So we should probably point out here that this agricultural revolution happens in a number of different places, and it happens at a number of different times, but it doesn't happen for everybody. So some parts of the world begin to grow their own food at certain times, but other parts of the world never do. So if you look at the area around Vancouver, right, if you look at kind of the west coast of North America, you'll see that the people who lived here never switched to agriculture. They were foragers, they were hunter-gatherers all the way up until when Europeans arrived a few hundred years ago. So some people at some places in the world are going to undergo this agricultural revolution, and some people are not. Some people are going to continue to hunt and gather. But again, you can see that in Egypt and in Mesopotamia, they begin to grow their own food maybe as early as 12,000 years ago. So the big question, of course, is why do people start to grow their own food? Why do they change their subsistence strategy when hunting and gathering has worked so well for almost 300,000 years, right? We were foragers for so long Why do people start to grow their own food? Now, to answer this question, it's difficult. Okay, it's difficult to answer this question for a few reasons. First of all, the archaeological record is very limited in terms of the transition to agriculture. So we said that foragers are difficult to see when you're doing archaeology because there's usually very few of them, right? They live in small groups for the most part, and they don't have a lot of stuff. They don't have a lot of things. And so they leave very little behind. And so in many cases, hunter-gatherers or foragers, they are invisible to the archaeological record. And so when we're looking at a period of history where people start to switch to farming, there's not really much there, right? It's a very, people don't have a lot of things. The other issue is that when people start to switch to agriculture, it happens before the invention of writing. And so we don't really know what people were thinking and doing because nobody wrote anything down. Fortunately, after this, people start writing quite a bit, and we have a window into what they are thinking and feeling and doing. But prior to written language, we don't really have this. The other issue, and I'd like you to remember this as well, is that switching to farming probably took generations to happen, okay? So foragers didn't wake up one morning and say, okay guys, today, no more foraging, we're just farming. Nobody thought that, okay? The switch from hunting and gathering to farming probably took a long time. It took generations, and it was very gradual. It wasn't super quick, okay? But the question still remains: why switch? Why should people? Why did people change their very successful subsistence strategy after hundreds of thousands of years of success? Okay, and that's what brings us to the article that I would like you to read. And the article is called "The Worst Mistake in the History of the Human Race." Wow, that's extreme, right? The article is written by Jared Diamond. Jared is a kind of historian, anthropologist. He's written a few books. Guns, Germs, and Steel, you might have heard of. It was very popular. He wrote The Third Chimpanzee, and I think he's written one or two books since then. One of them is called Collapse, that I would like to read. But he has he's written these books, and the article that we're going to read is his answer to this question right here. What happened? Why did people switch to agriculture? And so that's what we'll attack tomorrow. So I have this article for you to read, and as a bit of a preview, what I'll get you to do is read the article and then try to figure out the argument, right? We've been talking about arguments here today. We've been making up our own arguments. So here's kind of the real deal. We will read a short article, and then we'll try to figure out what Jared Diamond is arguing, what he's trying to convince us of, and the reasons that he gives us to believe that argument, okay? Obviously, we don't have time to really dig into it today, so we won't. However, I will remind you that tomorrow we're gonna have our first oral quiz, and so what I will do is, starting at 10 tomorrow, I'll open a meeting in Microsoft Teams, and then I'll just have one person come in at a time, and I'll make a list in terms of who comes in first and second. And I think when you're in Microsoft Teams, you should be able to see who is in the meeting with me. And so if somebody else is in there, just kind of stay out, but then when you see them leave, the next person can jump in. And so I'm hoping that it will go fairly smoothly. Again, I want you to have your camera on so I can actually see you. So you'll have to get out of your pajamas for tomorrow's class. Sorry. And again, in this quiz, it'll be oral, and I'll just ask you maybe one or two questions. What's this? What's that? Tell me what you know about this thing. And then you tell me what you know, okay? And it'll just take a couple minutes, and then then you'll be done, okay? Um, so, if you have any questions about that or anything else in the meantime, you can ask me on Microsoft Teams. But I think, other than that, I think that's probably all the time that we have for today. So, good work with the critical thinking stuff. I think we have a good start into understanding that skill. Tomorrow we have our little quiz, and then we'll dive into that Jared Diamond article, okay? So, yeah, that's all I have for today. Thank you for coming and for participating. Everybody did a really good job. I was really happy with that. Have a good afternoon, and I will see you tomorrow, okay? So, bye.